Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our regularly scheduled broadcast to bring you this very special announcement. It was 50 years ago today that the greatest prog rock album of all time dropped. 1972, September 13th. Yes drops their fifth album, Close to the Edge. And yeah, it may not be my favorite album of all time, but it is probably the best album of all time. How do I square that circle? Well, I like imperfections. Close to the Edge is about as close to a perfect album as I have ever heard. Whether it's the regular version or the Steve Wilson version, it's just amazing. So let's take a little bit of a look back at why it has achieved such acclaim. And to a lot of people, it is the greatest prog rock album of all time. Recorded in Advision Studios from February to June. There is some disagreement about the actual recording times. There are no logs that they could find for Advision. We do think that the February 1972 studio recordings were probably them working on America, and the majority of the actual album recorded in May and June of 72. Yes had enlisted the main studio at Advision, but things were getting so out of control that they basically took the whole thing over. At some point, Gentle Giant rolled in to record Octopus, and so Yes had to be relegated just to Studio One. But this was an album that caused a lot of consternation and a lot of stress in the band. There was infighting. Apparently, Bill Bruford and Chris Squire just couldn't get along. Squire kept telling Bruford to play different stuff because he wanted it to sync up with bass lines that he was writing. Bruford wasn't having any of it. And he got so tired of them debating endlessly about whether it should be an F or an F sharp that by the time they got to the end of recording it, one listen and Bruford knew that they would never top it. And so he quickly left the band. Alan White filled in for the tour, and obviously the great Yes Songs live album was a result of that touring. But it was a perfect situation in that Alan White had actually been living with producer Eddie Offord, so he had showed up to the studio a couple times, sat in on drumming on Siberian Khatru, actually helped with the mixing. There's photographs of him at Advision where John and Steve and Chris and Eddie are working on the faders, but there's an extra set of hands and it's Alan White. So he was kind of already a honorary member of the band before Bill ever quit. This album hit number 3 in the US. It's the highest chart position Yes ever had. They never had a number 1 album in the US, although they did have 2 number 1 albums in the UK. Tales from Topographical Oceans. Why did I say that? And Going for the One both hit number 1 in the UK, but this is as good a chart position as they ever got, although both Fragile and 90125 sold better. This one actually charted higher. Rolling Stone includes this as their 5th greatest prog rock album of all time. And in their top 500 albums of all time, they relegated it to 445th place, which is a little bit insulting. Apparently before the boys in the band decamped to Advision, after the Fragile tour, they rented out Uma Billings School of Dance to rehearse and, do some writing. And it's very interesting because apparently the 2 greatest songs in the history of prog rock were written at Uma Billings' dance studio because Supper's Ready was written there as well for Genesis. Eddie Offord had been on tour with Yes. He was mixing their sound on the Fragile tour. So he had been basically the 6th member of Yes for a couple of years now. So when they decided that they were going to create their masterpiece, where they were going to take all the long form stuff that they'd been working on the Yes album and Fragile and take it to the nth degree, John Anderson had been listening to, a lot of different things at this point, and he and Steve Howe, what a great songwriting team they are. Man, someday I would really like to see them working again together. John Anderson, after this album was released, he finally felt like he had achieved the right to call himself a musician. So on his passport, where he had previously left the occupation line blank, he now put in musician. I thought that was pretty cool. Let's talk about the album a little bit. The title track, wow, one of the greatest achievements in the history of mankind, without a doubt. Yeah, John had been listening to a lot of Sibelius at this point in time, particularly Symphonies 6 and 7, and I hear that for sure. He was also doing a lot of reading. He'd just finished reading some Tolkien. He finished The Lord of the Rings, and he had read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. So both of those literary influences definitely play into this record. He was also listening to a lot of Mahu Vishnu Orchestra. I guess Yes and them had done some touring together. So both John and Steve were really impressed by Mahu Vishnu Orchestra. And you can definitely hear that, particularly in the first 3 minutes of the song where it's just all craziness. It does sound a little bit like those guys. John has also said that Wendy Carlos was an influence, particularly the nature sounds and stuff like that. But obviously all those influences came together and we got ourselves the greatest 18.5-minute song ever written. Yeah. Another interesting thing that I found out, that when Bill Bruford had left the band, Brian Lane, the band's manager, made Bill Bruford sign all his royalties away for Close to the Edge to Alan White. And I guess years later, Alan paid Bill Bruford back for that. Side 2 has got the 2 mini epics, and You and I was originally called the protest song. If you listen to this here thing, when they're playing And You and I for the first time live, John would preface it by calling it the protest song, which is kind of cool. I don't find it being a protest song at all. To me, it just sounds like a love song. It's pretty great. I love how it starts out with Steve Howe playing those harmonics, and then okay, and Eddie Offer left that in. I love that. Siberian Khatru closes the album out, and John has stated that Stravinsky was his main influence here, and that a harpsichord solo by Rick Wakeman, just so cool. I guess it's a Goff harpsichord, and the developer of that instrument was in the studio helping them with, the best way to mic it and stuff like that. Let's talk about that artwork. Oh my goodness, you think about that gradient, black to green. It looked like it was almost like a disappointment after Fragile, but then you open that gatefold and it's just amazing. One of the greatest pieces of art that Roger Dean ever created. The photos on the back of the 5 members of the band and Eddie Offord, I guess those were taken by a guy named Michael Adelman, who was in The Sin with Chris Squire. The album achieved gold status in 1973. It went platinum in 1998. Pitchfork, in a retrospective analysis of Yes's early material, gave it a 9.0, which is amazing because you know how Pitchfork is about prog. They hate it. This album is also included in the 1001 Albums You Need to Hear Before You Die book, which is very cool. Prog Magazine rated this the #1 prog album of all time. Prog Archives has it rated as the #1 prog album of all time. Sound and Vision magazine called it the 32nd greatest album of all time. I remember in 1987 when the CD came out, and there were, some retrospective reviews of the album, and none of them were positive, but they don't know anything. They know nothing, these critics, But if you want to delve in a little bit deeper into this album and its history, I highly recommend this here book right here. This is a really great book written by Will Romero, Close to the Edge. How Yes's masterpiece defined prog rock. Prog Magazine has dedicated not 1 but 2 front covers to the album in the last couple years. That was 2 years ago. This was last year. Talking about how they did it and everything. And I highly recommend you go through that if you're interested, because it's a record that never gets old. It's a record that will never get dated. To me, I listen to it and it sounds as fresh as anything coming out today. I absolutely adore Close to the Edge, and happy 50th birthday. What an amazing achievement. John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, Bill Bruford. 2 thumbs up, my friends. Yeah, it will never be topped. No one will ever do what they did. And yeah, you guys know how I feel about Yes. But anyway, obviously, I preempted our album cover series for this. I just realized that September 13th meant a little bit something to the prog world. So I thought I'd just do a little memorial, a little tribute to the greatest of all prog rock albums, Close to the Edge. You guys are the best. God save the king. Peace.